Okay, over to Mark.
Thank you. Hello. And you say more boring stuff. You haven't heard me speak yet, so don't count your chickens before they're hatched. It's good to be here. The short version, I'll just basically show you a workflow, but to give you a quick summary, Alistair and I have known each other now, I suspect, for 2 or 3 years, really. It's pre-COVID. We first started talking about the issue of PDF remediation. And as you say, Lillian, our background has been in doing bulk remediation work for companies across both publishing and in the public sector with local government, state government in the States, and higher education. However, we also license our platform, which is called Accessibility Insight. It's being licensed currently by universities in the United States, but we're about to sign a chest agreement, which will make it available to all JISC members via a common license. Ben Watson is also someone that we've been working with and talking to for a long time since we entered the UK accessibility space. So both Ben and Alistair can tell you more about what we do. The essence of our process is to combine AI and machine learning through a platform that automates the structuring and assessment of documents. It began with documents, and that structuring renders the PDF as an accessible document. Out of requirement of one of our international publishing customers, we had to find a way to automate alt text generation for maths equations. And we did that by basically converting the maths in the PDF to ML, MathML, and reading that. And that process has been in operation now for the best part of 4 years, 3 to 4 years for that publisher. And we're able to kind of churn through large numbers of equations in PDF. Fine. What we've done now, and this is, I think, the way more interesting part, and certainly the part within the higher educational publishing sector that sort of turned the lights on, is that we can take, most common inputs, and I'll just flash up this little workflow to, I'll share my screen to give you a sense of what we're doing. Is that visible for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. What we're doing now is ingesting all, most common digital formats, the XML, EPUB, and HTML, along with PDF, and round tripping those files back in their original formats with the math ML attached, with the alt text attached to those files. And that's, that potentially, and that's, obviously changes the kind of economics around the generation of alt text for maths, and it also changes the kind of the turnaround times. Lillian sent me a couple of sample documents. It took about under a minute to do the remediation. It's fair to say those documents were obviously the first time we've seen those documents, and our machine learning and AI operates really like all of these, like any AI or machine learning from being trained. So with the educational publisher with whom this workflow that you can see here is operating, we're kind of achieving in the kind of high 80s to early 90% before we QA the work. But in the instance of the 2 documents that Lillian sent through, there were a number of issues that were flagged where, in time with more documentation, we'd be able to refine that automated process. The workflow that you see here can include CodeMantra doing QA at the end. We have a very experienced team of 100+ subject matter specialists who are both writing alt text and QAing alt text for a range of organizations and topics. Or the QA can be managed by the content owner. It entirely depends. The way that the workflow operates is that content is dropped into a location, it could be AWS. Accessibility Insight platform sits on AWS or FTP, and then we return those remediated files with the alt text attached. And it's basically as simple as that, frankly, he says. I mean, it's not, of course. Accessibility Insight won a Cody Award last year for the best use of best use of AI in content engineering and transformation. And when I've explained this to people who are technologically kind of aware, that has resonated. I'm told by my colleagues it's the award you can't pay for by turning up. So it certainly kind of ticked a number of boxes, and our peers within the Cody universe are the likes of Salesforce and Microsoft. So there's some very big software businesses who are winning awards at Cody. And I apologize if you can hear a cat squawking at me, but I'm afraid every Zoom call results in a cat making an appearance. That, in essence, is what we're doing. As I say, the process improves to a high level of accuracy through training. And we would be obviously very, very interested to see the kind of content you're working with and start to figure out, how we might be able to help you do a few, proof of concepts and case studies to kind of build up some understanding of what the issues are, and to potentially, it's always easier, I think, to talk around the issues when you're looking at the material rather than sort of hypothetically. But unless you want me to keep the image up, I'll stop sharing that now. I can share this around later. I did prepare a short kind of introductory PowerPoint to who we are and our kind of background in digital content transformation, which drives all this. We spent about 20 years in the content transformation space. Consequently, our data lake, which is what's driven the machine learning that we've used so far on the files that Lillian sent over. Data lake's fairly substantial, but with every new kind of content field or sector that we're operating in, we need to train and school that machine learning further. So just as with this, we're now working with some providers in local government who've got very specifically structured, quite simple in your terms, but specifically structured documents that we need to train the machine on, so that we can then apply that software into their workflow and it will run. But that's essentially it. And I think I've come in under 10 minutes, and I hope I've not left anything out. And I think Ben and Alistair will be quite well placed to tell me if I have. But otherwise, just, if there are any questions, please do let me know.
I think some of the key, it would be useful for people to, I don't know, Lillian, if you could send around the group the sort of before and after of the content, because that might be useful. It would be useful to kind of have a bit more on what the
sorry, it's me.
That's all right. I thought you were getting a very important call from above. It would be useful to get a sense of when the remediated PDF, because I had a look at the remediated PDF and I ran it through NVDA, and I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for, whether I was expecting to hit the image, hit the formulae and hear an accurate alt text, or whether it was more of a sort of math ML kind of, bracket this, bracket that. And in fact, what I heard was kind of neither of those specifically. So I was just wondering what the output, what we should be expecting as the output.
Yeah. Yes, and I've pushed those questions back to the team to review those comments and come back to me on what it is, why you've got what you've got at this point versus where we would get to.
I can't actually share the two documents more widely, partly because one was a set of minutes that needs to be redacted. So I think Alistair and Mark were aware that it was just meant for this internal consumption. And I agree that the the reason why I sent the second PDF, which was the kind of LaTeX output students get with 2 columns and some equations in the middle of it. It was a student produced document, so it would not have any accessibility settings if the students weren't aware of it. But I thought, let's throw the hardest test at this machine, right? And I was looking for it to reflow the text properly, if you see what I mean, in terms of reading order, which I think it did do. It did set up the reading order better than the original document. But yeah, it slightly failed at the equation side, which Mark is going back to his colleagues to ask. We have questions from, can we start with Norman?
I think Joshua was before me.
Oh, right. Okay, Josh.
I was just going to say, go ahead. My question was around like the workflow. So who kind of does this or owns this kind of conversion process? So the reason I'm asking for is thinking about kind of like library and access to journal articles where we don't necessarily own like an accessible copy, or the publishers haven't made a accessible copy, but are we able to create alternative format of this work? Does that work, or is it the students doing it there? And just how does it work?
So we don't have any kind of role or impact on the copyright of the content. We disavow any sort of responsibility for that. That's a decision that has to be taken by either the content owner or indeed the institution. What I would say is that the Copyright Licensing Association have been doing deals with publishers to allow all manner of copyrighted material to be used by academic institutions, libraries, for exactly the purpose you're describing there. And I would expect that any institution, and indeed the library, would be aware of what their kind of freedoms were to act within that. All we're doing, we're required to most of our customers to date own the content that they're having remediated. So, it's very straightforward. We are working with organizations who will be remediating content where they will have effectively created the accessible version of the file. And I know of publishers who've gone to similar companies and said, well, can we basically have that file back, and we'll use that as our accessible version? So it's a slightly kind of emerging field still, not least because at the publisher end, there's still an awful lot of work and thinking around what they need to do about content accessibility, digital accessibility, both in terms of scale and process. But if we know that currently, academic libraries have got the sort of wrong end of this relationship and are being, required under great pressure to produce accessible versions of files where the content owner is just not lifting, a finger to help. And clearly that's, remiss on their part, but I don't believe there's going to, there'll be any particular kind of comeback on that. A, because of the CLA work, and B, because in most cases, the library has flagged the requirement, the publisher has not done it, and you've gone and created it for them. So we take no role in sort of content management ownership. We simply transform the file and hand it back to you.
That's fine. And who does the transform? Is it kind of students? Is it some central kind of admin team?
It's an engine.
Okay.
There's everything I described to you, other than the human QA. And if in a different context, I could show you, there is a part of the platform where individuals can go in and refine the structuring and write in alt text for non-maths topics. But the assessment of the file, the structuring of the file, in the case of maths, the attachment of the alt text to the various tags in either the XML or the EPUB, that is all automated. So your software is performing that transformation and handing it back to you.
Okay.
So I just want to say, before we move to Norman, maybe just if we can keep it short so that we can move on with other contents as well, that'd be great. Thanks, Norman.
I came in a bit late, I'm afraid, so you may have covered this, but in that graphic there, you showed the process working with EPUB, HTML5, PDF, and so on. Those are all output formats. So you remediate an output format, but is there any mechanism for getting the generated alt text back into the source document?
What would the source document be in format?
LaTeX.
That's a good question. Let me ask that.
I mean, one can imagine this being a process that you do on the final version of a document before it's distributed. But if that would immediately evaporate the next time you made a trivial change to the document, then there's an issue there.
Yeah. I mean, the tech is an interesting one from a publisher standpoint, because they're also
in that the truth.
Yeah, we have learned of all manner of publishers, battling to establish a consistent kind of process for delivering the LaTeX. I'm not aware if we've done that, but I will talk to my colleagues who've been running the kind of mass work stream I was discussing with this publisher to understand whether, as you say, whether it's simply sitting in the kind of output, EPUB and web PDF files in this instance, or whether in fact, because it's sitting in the XML, that can actually apply to the LaTeX.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a variety of ways that could be automated. One can imagine. I think one issue is that there isn't at present, as far as I'm aware, any very strong consensus on how that alt text should be represented in LaTeX.
Sorry, can I comment on this? Because I was going to bring this up when I was going to talk. That actually there is a bit of an issue here exactly on how to do alt text, and there is currently I'm going to share my screen and show you something. There's currently on the. I just have my emails open, so that was the wrong time to come in. If you look at the LaTeX 3 project, they're actually talking about adding things for LaTeX accessibility.
Yes, so this is very much the right time to be asking these sort of questions, because
I'm saying that this, unless people actually talk to the LaTeX 3 people, that's probably not going to be happening, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So I think this is a good example of a discussion that, if we can kind of carry on in the JISC mail space, I think that would be really, really good. Luke has asked a specific question, which maybe Mark can answer in the chat. And again, a summary of that might be quite nice to kind of prompt further discussion in the JISC mail list about, bulk remediation of mathematical content, because there's a lot of different aspects to it. I mean, I would chime in with the fact that alt text is just one aspect of accessibility. Students who are blind and actually want to work with Braille would find alt text extremely cumbersome for an alternative format for maths. A number 3 is a 3, but alt text would actually be THREE, 5 characters instead of 1. So things like that to consider. But let's leave that contentious discussion to later and find out more from the presenters who are here today, who can share with us their expertise.
If I can answer one quick question that Alistair asked, the reason for the concatenation is the fonts.
Yeah.
So we don't have the fonts in this instance, they're custom fonts. I have got other quick answers, but what I will do is pull together the questions in chat, and then I'll stop talking and answer those with everything else that's been asked. And then I don't know if I can get into the JISC mail, but I can certainly email Lily and Alistair back and we can figure out a way of maintaining the conversation outside of this call, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be able to join the JISC mail as well.
We might suggest that there's the messy working document, the Google Doc. If you wanted to answer the questions in there, then we'll be using that to write the meeting notes to put on the GitHub. So if we could have a copy of the diagram that we could add into that, that would be really helpful. So if there's additional information, that you could put into there, then everybody from this group will be able to access it, and we can add the more succinct version onto the GitHub where we write a meeting story up, if that's okay.
Yeah, a stupid question. Have I got access to that?
I'll put the link into the
I've just put the link in the
just
chat.
done it.
Oh, great.
It's in the
okay.
chat.
Click on it
Yeah.
and you don't have access, then we can give you access to it.
I think it's anybody in the world can edit at the minute. So
It is, yeah.
we're being quite
Okay.
generous.
And hoping that nobody is going to go in there that shouldn't be.
Well,
No.
we can always revert worst case. So I think we're okay.
I'll do that. I'll also drop in, there's a short video which kind of explains the platform and relates it and uses tables as the kind of illustration, which might be of interest to people as well. But I'll put some information and I'll go through all these questions.
That sounds brilliant.
Brilliant.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm very keen that everybody in the world should see this document, and if they want to contribute to it, we'd love more people to. So as you're going through, if you've got things that you could add to this, please do. The next thing we're going to move on to is Shazia updating about some of the work that's being done at Glasgow, because she alluded to it a little bit last time, and a lot of us were quite interested in it, but we were running out of time. So if I could pass over to you to tell us a little bit more about that, please.
Well, thanks very much. So at Glasgow, we were testing out lots of different tools last summer, and had quite a lot of success with Pandoc. But the problem with that was that well, I shouldn't say it's a problem. It works very well with short and simple LaTeX files, but anything long or complicated throws up lots of problems. And I may have mentioned last time our level 1 and level 2 learning materials that we have at Glasgow are produced using quite fancy style sheets. So we felt at the time that R Markdown would be the best solution for us to, I suppose, convert them into more accessible formats, HTML really, and the relevant staff members were quite happy with that too. So I had a student working with me last year, and we put together a style sheet that would give an output document which was similar appearance-wise to the PDFs, and it was basically adapting the text file so that it would work in R Markdown. So essentially, we were doing a find and replace to fix the syntax that didn't play nicely with R Markdown. So after the summer project was done and the student left, Jake, who's here today, he's waving. Jake arrived in the School of Maths and Stats earlier this year. So he's one of our graduates, and he'd gone away for a couple of years to do other things, and he's back in Glasgow again. And we had a discussion about the types of things that I was looking at and what we wanted done, and pointed into some R Markdown resources. And a few days later, he came back with this wonderful automation plan. And I think at this point, what I'll do is I'll hand over to him so he can talk more about that. Can I also point out that Jake needs to leave a little earlier today? So yeah.
Yes, I'm going to talk about leaving. So yes, my history, I should talk a little bit about history. So I'm coming in from a systems engineering background. So not exactly software engineering, but sort of the system side where we do a lot of automation to automate processes. I worked in a company in London. But yes, so I came across this problem, and it seemed like it was going to be a lot of find and replace. It was going to be a very long, doing the same thing over and over again, seemed perfectly right for automation. And turns out it exactly was. So essentially what we've done is obviously we want to convert from LaTeX to R Markdown. And what we've done is created a script, or I've done is created a script in PowerShell, which is a language which non-system people don't use very much, but is strong enough to have, I don't know, pattern matching, regular expression pattern matching, if people know what that is. And you can sort of do a full program in it. If I was to do this again, I'd write it in another language that's a bit better for this, but it absolutely works. And I'm just going to show you what the results were. Give me a second. So let me share. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Perfect. Okay, so we started with these lecture notes, which was it's just sort of standard LaTeX lecture notes. Oh, okay, this isn't a good example because it's just got a load of input and stuff. But the program took in that lecture notes, converted it all into this R Markdown that is similar and takes in the maths mode that we've seen before. So we see this, but has quite a few differences. So things like double stars instead of math BF, things like this is how you do figures. And yeah, so the math will look the same, but things like side notes work very differently. They work as HTML side notes, which was, as Shazia, I'm sure, will be happy to tell you, absolutely awful to deal with. Yeah, so we've got a conversion, and the program itself, which is this, and I've just sort of made a bit smaller than usual, is quite simple in logic, even if it gets quite complicated in what actually happens. So it's quite simple idea, sorry. So we get the course info from the thing, we remove the tech header and the footer, we convert the text body to RMD, and then we add in the header and a few other RMD things to fit for the style sheet. Then we update the style sheet, because the style sheet every time will have a different number because of numbering in each thing. Yeah, but overall, it's right now, this was put together as a messy thing that's going to work for everything. But I have a feeling if someone actually sat down and worked through exactly what I've done and what could be generalized, you could probably have something which would be able to convert quite nicely from LaTeX to R Markdown. Now, I'm pretty sure you cannot. So for people that know what I'm doing is creating a LaTeX parser and turning into a LaTeX parser and then converting to R Markdown for some of the things that I've parsed. Now, creating a LaTeX parser fully is impossible without just functionally putting in LaTeX, creating LaTeX again. So you have to do some subset, and obviously the subset people use will change depending on who it is. But I think that quite a lot of the things are similar enough that you don't actually need to do too much. You could just sort of try and isolate the signal things. Yes, I don't know what else to say here. I'm going to say that's it. And I just hit the radiator. I'm very sorry. I'm going to say that's it. If anyone has any questions.
Would people like to see the PDF and the HTML versions?
Oh, that's sensible.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Have you got something handy there, or shall I do that, Jake?
We both have to find it, so it's up to you.
I've got it handy.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
And with this output, the HTML version is mostly done by the automation, plus a little bit of hand wavy for a few odd bits. A little bit of hand done by hand for a few odd bits. Things like when you have square brackets on items on itemize, and the program doesn't deal with it that well, but this is 100% because this only happened twice, and so I just thought it's better to just do it manually for those 2 times. Okay, so Lillian asked how it handles packages, and it only does, so we only have one package for our course, and so it only works with packages that already exist in R Markdown. So it absolutely is not a big sort of, you can't expect to do huge things. Norman, should I ask what your question is?
I've used a LaTeX to HTML converter called LaTeX ML, and that works by transforming the LaTeX into an intermediate XML representation, which might, and that strikes me, that might be an intermediate representation which is well defined, which you could then turn into Markdown at that point. So jump in at that point. So do half of the LaTeX ML work and then jump out to the side to Markdown. It would still be a fair amount of work, but it would involve an XML language rather than anything else. But that would be a well-defined starting point.
Oh, but then you just need an XML parser, which I guess is a lot easier to write than a LaTeX.
Exactly.
Parser.
Yeah. Exactly. So the LaTeX has done all the impressive work of actually being a LaTeX parser, which then spits out this intermediate representation.
Yeah, you just need an XML parser. You'd still have some issues to convert it to R Markdown. Yeah, no, that would be.
I'm not saying it wouldn't be trivial. It wouldn't be trivial.
Yeah, absolutely not trivial, but might be easier than what we've had already. Yeah. Sorry, Joshua. No, I'm not. I'm currently not sharing this just because I just created it off the cuff. But I'd be happy to sort of discuss it with people about things, because it's a very rough program. But if people want to use it, I'm happy to discuss about what can be used where and which parts of it. It's a lot, yeah. There's lots of sort of hacking together and built, because I know that how certain people write their code, their LaTeX code works in certain ways. But I would be happy to discuss it if we want to use it more generally. And all right, Luke's answering something else. Okay, cool. Yes. Have you got your thing yet ready, Shazia? Is Shazia still here? Did she just leave?
Yeah, I wonder if her connection's dropped out or something because she suddenly disappeared. We can come back to it, and maybe if we haven't got it now, we can always put it into the notes in the meeting story to send out actually. But yeah, it'd be good to see it. I've put in the notes here, if anyone's interested in using it, then to get in touch with you, Jake. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. But it's going to be very sort of hit and miss. It won't work for it, but it will be sort of, it's a good starting point.
Yeah, it's definitely if somebody else thought they might like to take it on and do a bit more with it, that's exactly what this kind of group is for. People bring a bit of an idea and eventually we help each other, and we might end up with something brilliant. That's what I'm hoping.
Shazia's back.
Ah, lovely. You doing okay, Shazia?
Did you accidentally leave the meeting? Oh, we can't hear you.
Hear you. Nope, still can't hear you.
You're not muted, but we can't hear you. So something's gone wrong.
Your microphone isn't working, I would hope.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
Oh God. So apparently there was a problem and the whole computer decided to restart at that moment. So apologies. Right, so I was on the verge of sharing my screen and showing you the PDF and HTML version of the files that we've been working on. Is that okay? Shall I share my screen?
Yeah, if you're able to do that quickly, that'd be great.
Okay, here we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what our PDF files look like. So, you know, quite nicely done. And then this is the corresponding HTML version that we do. So this is all Jake's handiwork, where it was all
well done.
automated.
I think the exercises were actually fully automated without needing any hand.
Very little. Yeah, there might have been the odd little thing here and there, but
spaces or things.
It was very, very good. Yeah. So.
Brilliant.
So I think some of the hardest things to do are things about side notes and counters, which surprisingly are sort of counting it to make sure that you have theorem, blah, 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 because you don't want to hard code that into the LaTeX. Because if you do, then if you had any other theorems, you're gonna have to rewrite it every time. I think currently we are hard coding figure numbers, which isn't the best idea, but works for us. But there's actually still an issue to do with counters that I need to fix and learn a little bit of JavaScript to fix. But that's a future sort of a little bit like that. That's a sort of very much end result. The actual main program still works fine.
That was really good. If you're happy to share those examples, we could add them into either just the messy document or into the meeting notes as well, if that would be okay for people to have a look at who didn't make it today.
I've got some kind of test files that I could send you.
Right.
I don't know if it's okay to share the actual worksheet.
Yeah.
So I'll see what I can rustle up and send to you.
Can I quickly answer Luke's question because it's very quick rather than Lillian's? So Luke's question, does the bracket text the math resize the browser window when the browser window is resized? I believe it does. Shazia, can you confirm that? Because it's HTML, so it should just move like HTML does. I don't think there's anything that fixed in the CSS. So it does work better on phones, I think is what we're saying. If you change the...
It doesn't seem to be... terribly well for some reason.
So yes, I believe it does. I can double check myself because I actually have it.
Is it? Can you see?
If you just press Control and the plus, it'll resize the text probably.
Yep.
Get bigger.
And also, Shazia, if you right-click on a particular bit of maths for me.
Sure.
Ah, okay. Are you in Chrome? You're in Chrome, yeah. Okay.
I am.
Yeah. If you were in Firefox, that would probably give you the MathML, the MathJax menu. But yeah, in Chrome.
This isn't MathJax.
No.
It wouldn't give you the MathJax menu.
Okay.
Sorry, yes, Lydia, what was your question?
Actually, I was just putting my I was just channeling my Alistair McNaught, and I kind of thought, Alistair, that in a weird sort of way, what we could start to do as we are devising so many different people are inventing quite a few different workflows, and it's almost nice to maybe have a series of it's like a grid, a table that kind of says, does it output X, does it output Y, is it from a sustainability point of view, would it require a Jacob in every department to kind of help you fine tune that workflow, or is it something you can do out of the box, you know? And I see Luke nodding away as well. I think it's like we have such a series of workflows that I think this group we could do with starting to do the analysis of how we look at something and decide on a scale how easy it is to replicate, or whether it's worth investing time in actually customizing it for your particular set of people, because I think there's room for all those different methods.
And I think also that going back to Luke's point about asking Mark if there were particular math elements that quality assurance showed were consistently failing, you know, if we can identify that, not necessarily just from a CodeMantra perspective, but actually from a whole STEM and maths, that does make it easier, because you can begin to say those are the hard bits that you will need a Jacob for, and these are the easier bits that actually you just need a tool for, or that you can do on your own.
So we're going to call it the Jacob scale from now on, yeah?
I mean, I'll take it. Actually, I quickly answer David's question. So David, our Markdown actually has embedded LaTeX in it for things in math mode. It's not, I don't think it's MathJax. I think it's actually Pandoc in the background, which is quite funny because we were avoiding Pandoc in the first place.
Is your Pandoc converting to image though then?
Pardon?
Is it then embedding images in the HTML? Because I think that's an option. You can choose what Markdown does, whether it spews out the MathJax in the HTML, whether it spews out SVG images, whether it's, I think there are options.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure then. I haven't looked too much into it. I assumed it wasn't MathJax, because it doesn't feel like MathJax when I look at it.
No, I agree, yeah.
I've just put a couple of notes as a separate item in the notes here to say about Lillian suggesting pulling together different processes, and Alistair's about collecting the bits of maths that are particularly tricky. My first thought on that actually is that it would be quite nice to have a LaTeX document which had examples of tricky maths, so that when we're all testing things, we just can use the same one. So I wonder if people have got good suggestions for that, then I'm happy to pull something together, or we could make it a bit collaborative. But if we could find interesting bits of LaTeX that are hard to convert, or other examples, things that are tricky, not great, then we could have something that we'd then be able to use for testing, which might be helpful. So I'll pop that in there as something we can come back to maybe. Okay, so we've only got 10 minutes. Sorry, go on, Norman. Did you want to do a quick question? We've got 1 minute.
No. If we had more time.
Are you sure? So the last thing that's on the agenda here is about Talmo. I don't know how many of you know about Talmo. Could I just ask people to turn their microphones off if you're not speaking? Because I'm just getting quite a bit of feedback. Lovely. It's teaching and learning and assessing maths online, something about that. I've been through some of their things and they're very, very good. They put a call out today for proposals for the next academic year. And the way it tends to run is that there will be short events, and they have a programme of things over the whole year that's running online. I wondered whether, as a group, we might like to do one of the options is organised workshops. So 2 to 3 hours consisting of multiple individual talks around a common theme. And this would be, the audience here would be academics who are teaching maths mostly. So it's not something that I wouldn't be able to really present very much at it. I could possibly get one of my students to present about the work we've done and then how we came up with our accessibility guidelines of using Pandoc. But I wondered whether it might be interesting if we could coordinate. So I'd be happy to do asking other people. So some of the things like people have been showing here today, if we were to do some short sessions where people said, this is the method I use, and I'm just going to show you it, getting somebody to show Pandoc, getting somebody to show, like we've just had there, the one that you've been doing up at Glasgow, I think that could be a really interesting and valuable session. So I just wanted to get people's thoughts about that, whether you think that that's a good idea. And more importantly, do you think that you or somebody at your institution might be convinced that they could present on it? Because if we were to put something in, we'd need to find an amount of people that actually wanted to do it, because I think myself and Lillian probably would be happy enough to do the coordinating part, and the kind of making it work bit, what would be looking for other contributions.
Just like we did for the JISC accessibility clinic, drop-in clinic event, what we would do, for instance, is create a Google Doc, and people, you know, could suggest items that they want to talk about. Either that, or between us all, we could put in full 1 hour. Some of us could probably put in full 1 hour proposals or 30-minute proposals. But I think it would be really good to get a strong representation from this group, all mentioning digital accessibility and all mentioning why the students would find these alternative formats useful. Because I think sometimes there isn't enough talk about the student experience of these materials. And one particular thing I'm going to add to our members update that I kind of learned since the last time we met, what was our blind math students coming back and saying, yeah, you can make all these materials accessible on the web, but how am I going to send my written material back to a lecturer so they understand it? How are they going to talk to me and communicate with me in such a way that we can do it synchronously and we both are using the same tool? So that was very relevant. And it's something I've literally hot off the press this morning, had a discussion with the lecturer and found out some new information, which I'm kind of like, wow, that's really something to share. So, I mean, I'd be interested in kind of putting a session across clearly. That's more kind of, you know, I tend to do like an organizational approach. That's my angle when it comes to accessible maths, in any case. So I don't know, do people, I keep getting that formula wrong, that bit of LaTeX wrong, Cordelia. So do we know if people want to combine together to do one thing just on digital accessibility, or can we have a kind of show of hands in the chat whether you think you might put in something individual or combined? So just those two options, if you could type in the chat, that could maybe help us work out how big a combined session might be and whether we've got quite a few interested in individual.
I'll just put in the chat what the other things that they're looking for are, because there were 3 things that they were actually proposing. 20-minute short presentations, 50-minute seminars, and then organised workshops, which is the 2 to 3 hour one with multiple talks. So what I thought was the 20-minute presentations, we would have multiple of those but all on accessibility on the same day.
Would they be open to having an accessibility channel at the conference?
It's not so much a conference, so they have previously had it as a conference, but the way that it's run this year is it's been events throughout the year. So it's actually, so this would be that they have kind of once a month or so, they have something on a particular topic. So it's just a series of online events rather than a specific conference is the plan, I think, from what I can tell.
But this is great because we were talking about organizing a conference, but we don't have to. Someone else can do all the hard work and we'll just piggyback on their organization and promote accessible maths approaches. So David,
Mark,
Luke.
you've got your hand up. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll lower my hand now if I can. Right. Yeah, so forgive my ignorance about the conference and what the topics might be, but from my experience of doing conferences, we spent a lot of time last year talking about, practical routes to delivering accessible content rather than what had previously been the case where there was lots of quite generalized sort of panels. And I wonder whether, in what you already know about what's being talked about, how focused the panels might be and how focused the kind of topics might be within the conference, and therefore how that would affect, the kind of constitution of each section and what amount of time you'd want to give over. So as an example, we had an hour panel at the AbilityNet conference last November, really talking about the implementation of workflows and creating a working culture that would create sustainable, accessible, outputs and awareness in groups, and used our technology as a way of kind of underlying the question of what's the route to achieving that. Is it, there's people and there's awareness and there's, diversity training and all those things. But then it's a technology that you can utilize and its shortcomings or its capabilities. So I thought I'll throw that sort of at you because that's what I've been, learning over the last sort of 18 months, that it's important to kind of build, I think, to focus on what's achievable and what the route to it and what success looks like, what's the route to achieving it, and how do you sustain it and measure that? I mean, those are the things that matter to all of us, I think. And, if we can help in any way with any of that, then please do, let me know, because we'll be delighted to.
Thank you.
That's good. Yeah, so we've got a couple of people saying that they'd be happy to do demos. I suspect there will be other people not here today who might be able to be roped in, which sounds like we would have a goer for doing. So it isn't a specific conference, it is just a series of things they do, and it's very much run by people who teach maths for other people who teach maths, and it's relatively informal, because I've run a session in the past where I showed something else that I was working on. So I think we could probably pull together quite a few things, something from Lillian with getting the student perspective, something from specific people saying, and here's a particular tool that I've used, and then talking about, like Mark says, about the processes and how you make it work. So I can, we can have a little bit of a look at that. Maybe Lillian, we could have a chat about it, because I'm conscious we are coming up to 4 o'clock. We could have a little bit of a chat about it sometime in the next couple of weeks and put something out to people with a bit more detail about what we might want.
Yeah, we'll send around a Google Doc, and once each person's kind of designed a session that they're willing to present, we could take that showcase of presentations and suggest other conferences where we can all recycle our presentations and cut them to size, because I think it's about getting that message out there. So this group's brilliant for being willing to do that about accessible maths, and I'm very grateful to be with colleagues who are willing to kind of talk about these things. So okay, Joshua, no worries.
I like they're happy to support a joint something. Yes,
Yeah.
that's kind of where a lot of us are at the minute, and that's great. Like, I just, having been to some of the Talmo things and had a look at what they've got, there's been things about digital accessibility on there in the past, so I think there'll be appetite for it, and hearing other people's stories is always really useful. So yeah, I'll speak to Lillian. We'll work something up for people to start putting sessions into, and then we can send that to Talmo to see what they think to it.
Okay, so next steps, one of us will create the meeting stories in the GitHub, and I think we'll line David up to share his presentation on his workflow with the R Markdown. Is that right, David? I can't remember if it was Markdown.
Technically, Bookdown is
Bookdown, yes,
with
Bookdown.
A few extra things untouched.
Absolutely fab for the next meeting. So what we'll do again, Jenny and I will kind of work out when we're available, and David, of course, who is one of the key presenters next time, and then we'll suggest a meeting date. We'll make sure we record it so that if people can't make it, that they get the information. So yeah, watch out for an email from us in between times.
Have a good rest of your day. Nice to see
Okay.
everybody. Thank you very
Thanks,
much,
everyone.
for presented.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for sharing,
inviting me.
Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.